Hi friends, hey, Taylor here again. We are currently in the season of Lent and in week 3 of our series studying the Gospel of Mark. So we've been looking at stories and encounters with Jesus that are life-changing. And that's what we're gonna do again today. But first, I'm gonna ask you this loaded question. What are some labels, good or bad, that maybe you've held on to? You know, labels like nerd or jock or teacher's pet or rich or popular. The list could go on and on. The truth is, labels are a big deal. But what do we do with them? To answer this question, we're going to look at the story of someone who had one of the worst possible labels for her time. The story starts with Jesus talking to a man named Jairus, who was a high-ranking religious leader. Jairus was rich and powerful. He came to see Jesus because his daughter was dying. Jairus was desperate for Jesus to come to his house and see her. So together, they walk towards Jairus' house. Then something strange happens. Jesus went with him, and all the people followed, crowding around him. A woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding. She had suffered a great deal from many doctors, and over the years, she had spent everything she had to pay them. But she had gotten no better. In fact, she had gotten worse. That's from Mark 5:24 through 26. So we don't know a lot about this woman, but we know that she's an outcast. She had an illness that caused her to get one of the most uncomfortable labels in society, unclean. That didn't mean that she needed a shower. It was an identity. She was forced to live on the outskirts of town. She couldn't interact with other people like a normal person. You know how a friend of yours will get a cold and you'll keep maybe your distance for a day or two. It's like that, except their whole town kept distance for 12 years. On top of that, she had spent all of her money on doctors, only to hear that there was no hope. In other words, she had been told unclean would be her label for life. In her desperate situation, this woman does something so unexpected. In verse 27, it goes on. She had heard about Jesus. So she came up behind him through the crowd and touched his robe. For she thought to herself, if I can just touch his robe, I will be healed. So this woman knew how everyone else saw her. She had no place in society. She definitely wasn't supposed to touch anyone. But she was convinced that Jesus was somehow different. So listen to what happens next in verse 29. Immediately, the bleeding stopped, and she could feel in her body that she had been healed of her terrible condition. Jesus realized at once that healing power had gone out from him. So he turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my robe?" So in a huge crowd, it could have been anybody. Jesus' followers tried to convince him just to keep moving. But Jesus was certain that something important had happened. He felt it. Terrified, the woman falls to the ground and admits what she has done. And what happens next is amazing too. In verse 34, it says, "And he said to her, 'Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Your suffering is over.'" In 2 sentences, this woman's life changed. Jesus changed everything. Did you see what he called her? Daughter. To a woman who had been completely avoided, who'd been kicked out and kept out, Jesus calls her his child. This is the only recorded time in history when Jesus uses that word. The bleeding woman was an unlikely candidate to receive a new, powerful label. In one word, daughter, her identity changed. All of a sudden, she saw herself differently. When Jesus said, "Go in peace and be freed from your suffering," the woman was physically healed. She stopped bleeding, but Jesus was referring to more than just her physical suffering. I think he saw a woman whose labels caused her a lot of pain. She was living under opinions and judgments of other people, and she was suffering because of it. So Jesus gives her a new label, one that frees her from being a victim of everybody else's label, one that freed her from being a victim of her own label. Jesus invited her to let him decide who she was, and he called her daughter. Jesus changed this woman's identity. She thought she was a nobody. The whole town saw her as a nobody. Jesus told her she was a somebody and that she mattered. Jesus' cleanness made her uncleanness clean. His identity infected hers, not the other way around. And we see there's a label that beats all other labels, his. You guys, labels are temporary. They're small picture. We make decisions about ourselves and other people without all the information. God sees everything. That's why there's a label that beats all other labels, his. Like the woman in the story, many of you have given yourself labels, or they've been maybe given to you, and you feel trapped by them. You feel like you either have to live up to them or you need to live them down. Some of you have already decided, I'm just a fill in the blank. You've never considered being or doing or trying something else. Some of you might look at your family that you come from and you've made some decisions about who you are based on your family's maybe financial situation or divorce or dysfunction. Maybe you've labeled yourself as a victim of your family. Some of you might come to church, but you feel like you don't fit in. And maybe based on your past or on some bad decisions you've made, you've decided that this is never going to be a place that you belong. Well, students, I want you to walk away with your identity changed today. And it starts by asking you these two very big questions. The first, who gets to label you? Who decides who defines you? Pay attention to your words. What kinds of things are you saying about yourself? What kind of things are you believing? If a label enters your mind, don't ignore it. Ask yourself, is this true of me? Is it just a temporary label based on what I can see? While I'm bombarding you with a few questions, here are a few more. Are you allowing your past to define you? Your relationships, your achievements, other people? Or are you going to allow Jesus to define you? Look to him for who you are. Let him have the final word on who you are and who you can be. Remember, there's a label that beats all other labels, his. So the second question is, who gets to label others? When you look at other people, you will be tempted to see people through a filter of their label. You'll see them as unclean or unimportant or unlovable. You'll see others maybe as rich or popular. Most of the time, you won't even notice that you're doing it. Most people, once they've established people's labels, then determine how they'll treat those people. It's like the label creates their worth, and if we're not careful, we'll allow the label to determine their worth. And we'll mistreat some of the people that Jesus paid the most attention to. But there's a different option. What if you allowed Jesus to lead the way? What if you allowed him to put his label on your friends or your family members, your classmates, your teammates? Maybe a bigger question is, will you then treat them accordingly? Like you, Jesus calls them his sons and daughters. That label is permanent, and it trumps every other one. Friends, people who encountered Jesus had their lives changed. In this case, he changed a woman's label. And by doing so, he changed the way people thought about her and the way that she also thought about herself. You have the power to do the same thing.